Hey everybody! So a few weeks ago I did a video about some of the terrible e-bike laws that seem to be cropping up all over the place, and the goal of that video was to look at all of the options available to make better e-bike laws. And I asked for your ideas on this topic as well, and after a flood of responses, I'm back. And I've got some company today. Kaylin is back. Hey, Kaylin.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks for coming back.
For sure.
So Kaylin's been a big part of Shifter over the years. She's helped out with tons of videos, but you haven't been on camera in a while, have you?
No, I tend to be a little more behind the scenes.
I thought it would be great to get her perspective on all of this. And also, you've been busy working on something else for Shifter, too.
Yes. Tom and I are co-creators of The Ultimate Guide to Bike Commuting and Urban Cycling, our Shifter course, and we are doing some updated content for the course around e-bikes and cargo bikes.
Yeah, so we'll add some modules on e-bikes and cargo bikes coming in the next little while whenever we get finished. So keep that in mind. So anyway, Kaylin's here today. She's an e-bike rider, like a daily e-bike rider, I would say?
Yes, I have a cargo bike. My family has a cargo bike. I have two little boys, and we ride around Calgary very often on our cargo bike.
And you're just a general bike person who cares about this stuff, but maybe not as nerdy about e-bike laws as I've had to get over the last little while. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say. Fair to say. I am a e-bike rider, but far less in the weeds than you are on all of this.
Right. So I thought it would be a good sort of perspective as we really get into the nitty-gritty here to have your insight on this. All right, you ready?
Ready.
Okay, let's dive in. Okay, so after tons of feedback, what I've done basically is broken this down into a bunch of themes that have emerged from both the survey and the comments. I'll actually post the full survey results in a link down below if you really want to see those, because they're really interesting. But the themes that emerged, we'll go through each one, and then at the end of this video, the goal is we're going to write a new law that's better than the ones that are coming out. Neither of us are policy writers, so we'll see how this goes. But that's the goal anyway. Okay, so the first theme to emerge is sort of about the scale of the problem here too. And it was the first question on the survey. And the question was, where you live, how well do you think e-bike regulation is working? And this is the chart that came back.
And it's funny to see because, as I think you'll show it on the screen, as you'll see, it's a pretty even split between all four options you gave.
I mean, it's kind of amazing. Like, this is not made up. You could almost not make up a survey that is this evenly split. So I think this is like just a sign of the scope of the problem we're dealing with here. Hey, like we can't even agree on what the problem is.
For sure, for sure. And maybe if you ask people in a specific city, you might have slightly different answers. I think the fact your audience is from all over, I think that's reflected a little bit in what you see there.
Okay, the second theme that emerged is the question of like, what even is an e-bike? And one of the biggest problems is the e-bikes have changed so much in the last 5, 6, 7 years that we don't even really know what we're talking about when we say the word e-bike. And I think the big problem here is the conflation of what we call e-bikes and what are sort of becoming known as e-motos. So those electric motorcycles or mopeds that have electric motors versus the sort of traditional pedal assist bikes too. And we're just like, in North America, especially when we use the word e-bike, we're referring to all of them. And that's a problem because they're not the same and they probably shouldn't be treated the same. And just some of the comments around this, someone from Wisconsin said he gets tired of seeing a guy riding an e-moto with no pedals on the bike path every day. Nothing's being done about it, super fast speeds. Someone from Australia said they get really frustrated watching the media whenever there's a collision or something involving an electric motorcycle and they just call it an e-bike. That drives them crazy. I can totally understand that. Someone from the UK is sort of frustrated watching food delivery bikes that are clearly illegal motorcycles and the police are doing nothing about it. We'll get into that a bit more later too. So, you know, this whole idea of the word is very important too. It's different here in North America too. What do you call your bike?
I would say an e-bike or a cargo bike. I would not use the word you have been using.
Pedelec. Pedelec.
Yeah, not a word I would use.
Yeah, I don't think you hear it a lot here. Like, I don't think if you ask most North Americans what a pedelec is, they would even know what it is. Maybe you don't know what it is. Pedelec is a word that means pedal electric. And in Europe, this is what's commonly used to refer to an electric bicycle that has a pedal assist electric motor. So when you put pressure on the pedals, it gives you a bit of an assist. And when I think of e-bike, this is what I think of. But I think this is where a lot of the concern comes from. These fast, heavy electric motorcycles on the pathways going really quickly. And
just to add a little more confusion, I think there are also e-bikes that are made to look like e-motos, even though they are not.
What I'm going to try to do, at least on this channel, is try to use the word pedelec wherever I can, because I do think we have to start separating what an e-bike and what an e-moto is.
And I struggle a little bit with that because I find myself even having to explain to people what a cargo bike is.
So now we're throwing another
So now we're adding in another confusing word.
Maybe it's more like we need to call the phrase e-moto or electric motorcycle should probably be used more often when describing those things.
Yes.
But it also gets into the next point, which is that sometimes it's hard to tell.
Exactly, yes. How do you feel about banning pedals from e-motos so they can't pretend to be bikes?
I don't know. Like, I think there is probably a use case for an electric motorcycle with pedals,
What,
you know?
What is the use case?
Recreation.
Yeah, I am not in the e-moto world. I have opinions on the throttle bikes that go zipping by me, probably faster than they need to be on the path. So I come from that view where I'm riding my big cargo bike, not crazy fast, and I'm just not sure why there are pedals on these e-motos.
Okay, now we get into the spicy section of the comments, which is about throttles. And this is one of the more, you know, I wouldn't say controversial, I'd just say like there's various opinions on the presence of throttles on e-bikes. There's real tension, I think, between these two camps. On one side, people who say if it has a throttle, it's not an e-bike. And this is kind of roughly the European approach to it. Like in Europe, the rules are if it has a throttle, it's not a pedelec, therefore it is a motorcycle. And so the rules are different between those two things. Whereas on the other side, after making this video, I heard from lots of people who say they really value having a throttle on their electric bicycle. It helps them get going. Sometimes the bike can be really heavy and just pushing off can be tough, so they really appreciate it there.
I think throttles can be helpful in specific cases. I think all the people you just mentioned in the comments, I don't think they're zipping around going 40 kilometers an hour with their throttle. So I think it comes back to speed.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Lots of people said that in the comments too. It's like, it's not about the mechanics of the bike, it's not about the throttle, it's about how fast it can go. One thing that came up that I was not aware of, and when I made the last video, was this German rule about throttles. And on a pedelec, throttles are allowed, but they have to cap out at 7 kilometers per hour. Yeah. So they call it a walk assist. I don't know, as a middle ground, how do you feel about having a throttle that caps out at a really low speed?
I like that. I do. On my bike, there is not a throttle, but there is a walk assist mode because it is a big, heavy bike. So the idea is, if you have to walk it across an intersection or something, you get a little bit of assist, but it's not through a throttle. You have to sort of, I always forget how to do it because you have to...
You have to push the throttle.
Yeah, no, you have to push buttons very specifically to get, I guess it would then give you that little bit of power. So I think the lower speed.
Yeah, I understand those people who need it. Like, I get it, but I also feel like we have to find some middle ground. We're going to disappoint some people. I do like this. I think this might be a reasonable middle ground.
I agree.
Okay. The next theme that emerged over and over and over again is enforcement, and this may be the crux of the real problem here because, especially in the US, where the advocacy organization People for Bikes came up with a classification system several years ago that seems to work pretty well in a lot of places where it's enforced, but I just think we're seeing too many places where it's not enforced. And that actually led to this whole debate in the first place. And so the fact that it's not being enforced sort of led to this sort of crisis that we're in at this moment as well, too. So what do you think? Like, are you seeing enforcement as one of the issues here as well?
I don't know. I really worry about leaving this up to police. Obviously, police aren't the ones who would be writing these laws, but they would be the ones who would be enforcing it, and that just gives me a bit of pause that something like this would be on them to enforce. Especially, I think, because a lot of police don't understand the rules, and it's really difficult to tell the difference between a pedelec and an e-moto in lots of cases. We heard in the comments too from some people from the Netherlands where the police there have some device that they can take out onto the bike routes. It's almost like a little treadmill. You put the bike on and they can measure the speed of it so they can determine whether it's riding too quickly for the law or not. So that is a possibility, but it also takes resources major
and education.
Resources, and who are they pulling over in the first place to do those tests? And I just see, I don't love that as a solution.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, enforcement has to be part of this. Like, enforcement can also be like in the way things are sold, right? You can go to e-bike shops in cities all over the place and just buy off the shelf an illegal e-bike. And like enforcement can happen there too, like on a retail level or a consumer level or a import level. Enforcement has to be there, part of this in some way.
And what are your thoughts on age? Speaking of the New Jersey case that sort of set all of this off.
Yeah, it's weird how this all came about because of kids riding big, heavy electric bikes, but a lot of the rules has lost the perspective. Yeah, I mean, I want kids to be out on bikes as much as possible, but I think practically speaking, we probably should have age limits on bikes or restrictions.
Yeah, and I think of my bike, which it's a big bike. I'm someone who has ridden a non-e-bike for years and years, and I'm fairly comfortable getting around the city. And like it's still a learning curve. It's still took a couple weeks to sort of get used to it. I can't imagine putting a 14-year-old on that bike with very little instructions and just letting them go.
So enforcement, absolutely an important part of it, and part of that will probably have to be age restrictions too. Okay, the next theme to emerge is my favorite, because it's the one I talk about all the time. And so the next theme is infrastructure. This is the number one, in the comment section, this was the number one suggestion, is like the problem here is that we don't have proper infrastructure for cycling to accommodate e-bikes in our cities. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think good bike lanes matter. They matter hugely. As someone who's riding around with little kids, it's like an even more top of mind thing. I think it's just hard because it's then up to cities, right? And then you do get just big disparities in who is biking and how they're moving around a city. And I think a lot of people who would love getting around by bike just don't even get the opportunity, right? Because that infrastructure isn't there.
And I think the fact that we're now throwing e-bikes into these restricted spaces is part of the problem. If we had a more robust network, I'm not saying the problem would go away completely, but it would certainly help, I think. I mean, we're even seeing this problem in European cities or European countries that have great bike infrastructure. E-bikes are posing a new challenge, but absolutely infrastructure, huge problem.
So what I would like to see done by bike manufacturers, by YouTubers, by anybody that cares anything at all about bikes, is I want them to come up with some way to lobby governments for proper infrastructure. That's the hard choice. That's the difficult choice. That's the expensive choice. That's the one that takes the most time. It involves culture change and change management and all these huge things for the way that North America in particular treats transportation at its basic core. But that is the only way out of this. Other countries have done this, a few. We could do it too, but we have to want to do it. Thanks.
So the next theme that emerged, this would be the most upvoted comment. I'm just going to read the comment that got the most upvotes on the last video. I want more limits on cars before any e-bike restrictions. And I say, yes, hallelujah to that, right?
Yes, yeah, and you and I talked about this. Like, it's crazy we're even talking about this in the first place, right? Cars killed 30,000 people in the US last year. Like, think about that for a second. That is insane. And yeah.
And there's no speed limiters on cars.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's helpful to just take a step back and acknowledge like it is pretty wild. We are talking about this, but at the same time, we need to be.
I just also wanted to point out the least popular idea of the options that I presented in the last video, and that was insurance and registration, and that scored a dead last. Ironically, this is kind of what New Jersey did by forcing licensing and registration on e-bike riders too. But this is the idea that people liked it the least. Are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised. I think it's a big barrier. I think there are already barriers to biking, and this is just one more. You're going to deter a lot of people if there are insurance and registration requirements around e-bikes.
That being said, register your bike at a voluntary online anti-theft registry like Bike Index or Project 529. Those are great for stopping bike theft. It's not about controlling your behavior. It's just helps get your bike back in case it's stolen.
And entirely voluntary.
Entirely voluntary. That's a key part too. Okay, there's a bunch of ideas that came up in the comments that I hadn't thought about in the last video, so I want to just speed round them to you. I'll tell you them. You give me your reaction. The first one is regulating power to rate ratio instead of raw wattage as a classification metric on an e-bike.
You are in the weeds on that one.
That is deep.
I hear that, and I'm sure all those words make sense to someone else. As an everyday cargo bike rider, they do not make sense to me.
I think this is a great idea. Like, I do think power to rate ratio makes a bike, has more to do with the danger of a bike than just raw wattage. I think that's absolutely true. But if we're struggling to understand the difference between bikes now, the enforceability of a rule like this, I question.
The first distinction that needs to be made, in my opinion, is whether or not it has a torque sensor. A torque sensor in a mid-drive especially, but even in a rear hub, allows the bike to ride much more naturally, much more predictably, and much more like a regular bicycle, just with the ability to essentially increase your tailwind when you need it.
The next one is a simple online test that people have to pass before they're allowed to ride an e-bike, similar to the way that we make people take tests in some jurisdictions to fly a drone. What do you think?
It's a barrier. I'm sorry. It's another barrier. It's riding a bike. Let's not put more barriers up.
Another thing that came up in both the survey and the comments was the equity question and concerns about any kind of regulation like this will disproportionately fall on low-income riders or people of color. And this comes up a lot, is especially those people who are working for e-delivery companies, Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, that sort of thing too.
Yeah, I think that comes back to my concerns about leaving it up to the police to do enforcement. I don't think they will necessarily do it in a fair way, just based on how they do their job.
And I would just note on that New York has recently put in rules to put the onus for compliance around e-bikes for delivery drivers to fall on the companies rather than the individuals, which I think is probably a good first step.
For sure.
The last one I also want to point out is sort of taking a comprehensive approach to dealing with this problem rather than just looking at a law. And I got an email from a woman who works at something called the Belmont Project in California, who has a 6-point plan for dealing with e-bikes. I think it's really interesting to think about this. Compliance with the rules is part of that. So is education for both law enforcement and for consumers, communicating things effectively, offering safe spaces to kids, especially who want to ride e-motos in a safe way. I think like a comprehensive approach is probably the best way we're going to get this done.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. I also think you and I chatted a little bit about just like, is there an opportunity for education in schools?
Right.
And I know there's a program here in Calgary, I think you've chatted about before, that like really just introduces kids, high school age students, to the idea of biking and how they can use a bike to get around. And yeah, if you're doing that sort of stuff anyways and can incorporate some of this education into what they're doing, I think that's helpful.
Okay, now's the hard part.
Hard for you.
Taking all that feedback, all of the stuff that we've learned, let's make a recommendation on a better law. And you're going to judge my
I'm the judge. You are the law writer.
So I think one of the most important things in a good law is that it's easy to understand. So
Yes.
I think simplicity is important here.
Yes.
And so I think the first thing we need to do is define what we're talking about. And I do think there's classification here. I do think People for Bikes is on the right track with their classification system, but I think we need to simplify it because it's too hard to understand. It may be unworkable in some places. I think that's kind of what we're seeing. So I'm suggesting we go down to, there's 2 types.
Okay.
There's an electric bicycle and there's e-moto.
Okay.
The electric bicycle has a pedal assist motor that cuts out at 30 kilometers per hour.
Okay.
It can have a throttle, but the throttle must cut out at 7 kilometers per hour so that it's a walk assist or a get home very slowly assist.
And so that would be quite different than existing bikes.
Yeah, that would be a change. Riding an electric bicycle like that requires no licensing, no registration. Anybody can ride it. You can just pick it up and ride it, except for kids. I think there should be an age limit for kids. And I'm going to say 14.
14 sounds very young to me, but where we live, 14 is how old you need to be to get a learner's permit and drive around with an adult in a car, which is crazy. So maybe 14 we're okay with.
If you can drive a Ford F-150,
Yeah.
you can ride an e-bike.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that too. And I guess that's it. Anything other than that is not an e-bike. It's a motorcycle or a moped, and the laws, the requirements around riding those stay in place. So depending on the jurisdiction, you'll need brake lights, mirrors, license, registration, all that kind of stuff. Now beyond that, I also think there's other considerations here too. In bike lanes and pathways, we have to have speed limits. I would suggest that the speed limit should match the pedal assist limit of 30 kilometers per hour. Maybe in really congested areas, you lower that speed limit. I think that's fine, but they also need to be enforced. Enforcement, this doesn't work without enforcement, both on the streets and in the way they're sold, even on the way they're imported. It's the Wild West right now. We need to bring some restrictions in on that kind of stuff as well. I also think we need to look at the other things too, like we need to increase education. We need to get kids on these bikes and teaching them how to properly ride them. I think we need to give kids a safe place to ride their electric motorcycles or e-motos. If they want to go dirt biking, there should be a place where they can do that. Enforcement, we need to educate law enforcement and consumers. So there's all kinds of stuff to go into this. The law is only one small part of it. There's lots that we need to look at. So I think that's it. I feel like, I don't know.
Did we cover everything? Did you cover everything?
I think we're going to disappoint a lot of people with that, but I think there's no easy way to satisfy everybody. So let us know what you think. I mean, share your comments. Did I miss anything? Is there a better way of doing it? I don't know.
Am I the only one who does not like the word pedelec?
Yes, don't be shy
let us know.
about talking about the word pedelec.
Yeah, I also think you and I both agree that the more people on bikes, the better. And a way a lot of people get on bikes is e-bikes. So let's figure this out so we can get more people on bikes.
Yeah, and also speed limiters and geofencing for cars.
Yes.
What are we doing? Let's bring that in right now.
Let's put the control on the cars.
Yeah, and
not
better
just the bikes.
And better bike lanes.
Please.
Please, better bike lanes. Yes. Okay, we covered it all.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.